From around 235 to 285 AD, the Roman world lived through half a century of anarchy and chaos, with political instability not seen since the fall of the Republic. The position of emperor during this time can only be described as a meat grinder, with generals rising and falling in a matter of few years, external enemies pressing on the frontiers, and the transformation from the prosperous time of the early empire into the much harsher realities of the late empire. In the middle of this age of chaos, a brief dynasty arose. It was a short-lived dynasty, a sad dynasty, where each of its members saw a different violent end from external enemies or internal rebels. Most members of this family issued coins, meaning we have a numismatic legacy of this tragic family, and we are looking at their coins today. For that, we'll need once more some historical context. The year is 253 AD, and the two co-emperors, Trebonianus Gallus and Valerian, are caught off guard by a powerful general and usurper, Aemilian, who traps them at the heart of the Italian peninsula, killing both and assuming the title of emperor as an usurper. Before being caught, however, they enlisted the help of a loyal statesman and general. Descending from Gaul, the first character of our story, Publius Licinius Valerianus, was too late to prevent the death of the emperors, but he did catch Aemilian, killing him, and doing what any powerful general back in these days did, proclaiming himself emperor. This new emperor, Valerian, would spend the rest of his reign dealing with an empire that could best be described as a dumpster fire of imperial proportions. He enlisted his son, Gallienus, to help, rising him to the position of co-emperor and charging him with defending the west while he headed east to deal with the many attackers that threatened the region at the same time. We'll get to Gallienus, a very well-known face for any Roman coin collector, but for now, let's focus on Valerian and one of his coins. Valerian inherited a monetary system in clear decline. Years of civil wars and dwindling revenue from the taxes and the mines led to the debasement of coinage to pay for the armies and imperial expenses, and this practice was getting to dangerous levels by his reign. This example I'm showing you here is from his early reign, and it's probably the best silver quality you could ever find from his coins. By his time, these pieces were a mere 30-ish% silver, but the Roman mint workers managed to refine some technical trickeries that leached the copper from the top surface of the coin, giving it this lovely appearance of pure silver. Looking at the obverse, we can see the bust of Valerian, still made in reasonable realism, as by this time the portraits on coins were getting more and more generic looking. But alas, in this example we have a nice quality bust. Being an Antoninianus means he wears the typical radiate crown and draperies over his military cuirass. The legends proclaim his new imperial name, Imperator Caesar Publius Licinius Valerianus Augustus. Heading to the reverse, Valerian knew very well his reign was just made possible by the fact he counteracted a military coup by marching upon an usurper and enacting his own counter-coup. He knew very well there was immense value in guaranteeing the fealty of his troops and making some propaganda in their name. So in this reverse we see Concordia, the goddess of agreement and fair dealings. She's holding a set of Roman standards, those that would identify each Roman cohort into battle. As we read the legends, Concordiae Militum, the concord of the army. We see that this coin is here to show a message of unity and to dissuade any potential future usurpers. Valerian had a wife, Mariniana, who died before her husband became emperor. The image of an empress, a woman responsible for the dissemination of the imperial lineage, was a very strong propagandistic move to improve the emperor's image with the public and to give a certain image of stability and future continuation to his reign. Also, as the mother of the co-emperor, his son Gallienus, it helped to reinforce the idea that his son was of quote-unquote pure imperial blood, even if until the ascension of Valerian she was unknown to the public eye. Although coins of Valerian are very common, sadly coins of Mariniana are rather scarce. They aren't necessarily rare, but you need to look around for one if you want to add it to your collection. Looking at the obverse, we see the veiled bust of Mariniana. The veil meaning she had already passed away and was deified. The legend gives us an interesting lesson on Latin grammar. Typically, the legends on such a coin would read Diva Mariniana, indicating who is in the coin, the deified Mariniana. But here, that's interesting. Here we have written what we call a dative case. It's a grammatical case when something indicates a recipient of an action. So, as we read Divae Marinianae, it would translate instead to the deified Mariniana, or this coin is dedicated to the deified Mariniana. Looking at the reverse, we have a facing peacock. The peacock was a symbol associated to noble Roman women. It was considered a very fancy and expensive animal back then, just as today, and was a symbol of luxury and everlasting beauty. The legends, consecratio, meaning consecrated, proclaim her new status as a deified figure. Sadly for Valerian, in the 7th year of his reign, he was defeated by the great Sasanian king Shapur I, a fascinating character that deserves his own episode one day. He really was a thorn in Rome's side for all of his long reign, and he struck some very interesting coins as well. Shapur captured Valerian, and the emperor would live the rest of his days in captivity. Some say he was tortured and treated as a lowly servant. Some say he had molten gold poured down his throat. Others say that he just lived a comfortable life as a captive in the Sasanian court. Now Gallienus was all alone. He had enough problems in his hands already dealing with the West, but now he had an entire empire crumbling around him to deal with. If you don't know about the story of Gallienus yet, I strongly recommend you look into it. As well as my previous episode on his coinage, Gallienus actually did pretty well considering the disastrous situation he inherited. But with the multiple internal and external threats he faced, he could have very well witnessed the fall of the empire during his reign. Numismatically speaking, his coinage is one of the most abundant out there. He was forced to debase his coins to the point it looked like tiny scraps of metal at the end of his reign. For many of you, one of your very first coins will likely be an Antoninianus from his late reign. They're actually quite diverse and fun to collect, even though they're not very impressive looking. Not even his gold coinage went unscathed. The gold aureus of his reign was struck in poorer quality and reduced in weight significantly. The situation was very desperate. Typically, the Roman emperors did not touch the gold coinage. But for this episode, to illustrate the type, we have an Antoninianus of his early reign, when he still reigned together with his father, and the coin still has a very good appearance of silver, even though it had a fair bit of copper in it. This example must have been struck between 253 and 254 at the Mint of Rome. Looking at the obverse, we have the bust of the emperor. He is wearing a soldier's cuirass, as he should, because at this time every Roman citizen wanted their emperor to be out there taking the fight back to their enemies. And the legends read his imperial title, very typical of these coins: Imperator Publius Licinius Gallienus Augustus. Later on, as his coinage deteriorates, the legends will get shorter and shorter, as less and less space is available in the ever so smaller flan. This piece is a respectable 4.5 grams in weight. This is going to drop to an average of 2.5 by the time Gallienus meets his demise. At the reverse, we have Jupiter, the king of the gods, so commonly depicted on Roman coins from Republican times all the way to the conversion to Christianity. Here, we see the god holding his scepter and handling his famous thunderbolt, with the legends Jovi Conservatori, Jupiter the protector, Jupiter the maintainer, as according to legends, no emperor was able to rule the empire without the explicit consent of the great god himself. But all good things come to an end, and as I have just said, Gallienus, after a desperate but impressively long 15-year-long reign, will meet his end in a conspiracy, orchestrated by his high officials and Praetorian Guard. Like so many other emperors before him, Gallienus will be survived by his wife, Salonina, another very common sight on the trays of many Roman coin collectors, as her coins are almost as common as the pieces from his husband. Salonina bared Gallienus 3 sons, Valerian II, Saturninus, and Marinianus. 2 of these actually had coins struck on their names, but for now let's focus on the empress. As we can see in this example, some of her coinage can also be found in decent silver, although this example is starting to show that it doesn't have as much silver as it should. Looking at the obverse, we have the bust of the empress, and she has this interesting hairstyle with her hair curled on the back of her head. Like we can see this hairstyle in many different empresses. And as we can see, being an Antoninianus, it has behind her bust a half moon, the female equivalent of the radiate crown given to male emperors. The legends are very straightforward. Salonina Augusta, Salonina the empress. You might find on your example a longer version of these legends, Cor Salonina, with an abbreviation of her first name, Cornelia. So, just like the emperors are commonly associated with Jupiter, the king of the gods, the empresses are associated with Juno, Jupiter's wife and queen of the Holy Pantheon. This reverse depicts just that, Juno standing, holding a scepter and handling a patera, a cup used to make offerings. And the legends, Juno Regina, translate to Juno, the queen. I love how this coin complements the previous coin of Gallienus perfectly. You have a husband and wife on the obverse and quote-unquote divine husband and wife on the reverses. Salonina disappears from the public record in 268 AD, the same year Gallienus died, but we don't know exactly what happened to her. Some say she was put to death as the Senate found out about the fall of her husband. Others say she was allowed to live, as long as she left the public scene. Whatever happened, by this year she must have been miserable. Her husband was dead, her 2 older sons were dead, she only had the young Marinianus left. Marinianus was too young to assume any imperial position, so he didn't have any coins struck in his name. We then move on to the older son of Gallienus and Salonina, Valerian II. He was made Caesar and used by Gallienus as an imperial figurehead, being posted at Sirmium in Illyria, a major frontier city, as an imperial figure to dissuade any potential usurpers, and as Gallienus moved to defend the German frontier. But the young boy must have been around 15 at the time. He was in no way ready to protect himself in such a treacherous environment. Of course, for the surprise of no one, in 258 he was dead under suspicious circumstances. So let's take a look at a coin struck for this poor boy brought into the meat grinder of the 3rd century imperial court. On the obverse we have the image of the young Caesar, made in a slightly smaller bust size to show he was a young man, but already wearing full imperial regalia and wearing the radiant crown. The legends tell his name and position as imperial heir, Valerianus Caesar. While the obverse is rather typical for a coin of the time, the reverse is very creative. Gallienus must have wanted to pass an image that his elder son, assuming a position so young, was showing attributes of leadership or imperial might from a young age. Therefore, here we have a child Jupiter riding the goat, one of his symbolic animals. Such an unusual and fun design. The legends, Jovi Crescenti, the growing Jupiter, is meant to show him as an incarnation of a young and youthful new Jupiter. So nice, such an unusual design. We then head to his brother, Saturninus. Just like Valerian II, he was assigned by the elder Valerian and Gallienus as an imperial figurehead. as the emperors were busy dealing with pressing matters somewhere else. He was based in Colonia Agrippina, modern-day Cologne in Germany. He was also unprepared for the position, obviously, and made the fatal mistake of enraging the local troops as he demanded they return the plunder taken from a barbarian warband that had recently sacked Gaul. The troops, led by their general, Postumus, would besiege Saturninus and his city and kill the young man. This event would trigger the separation of the western provinces in the separatist Gallic Empire. So let's have a closer look at the Antoninianus of Saturninus. Very similar in style to the coins of his brother. We have a bust of a young Caesar here, smaller in size, with the same drapery and radiate crown. The legends proclaim his imperial name, Saturninus Valerianus Caesar. Heading to the reverse, we have the tools used by the ancient Roman priests on their ceremonies, a position Saturninus very likely must have held too, as it was common for Caesars to have the position of pontifex, priest, as their first official position. The legends above the design read, Pietas Augustorum, the piety of our emperors. Notice how the design is very thinly imprinted on the side of the coin, almost to the point of being unrecognizable and unreadable. This is very typical for 3rd century coinage. The quality of manufacture really starts to slip, and very worn dies just keep being used long after they were supposed to be switched. It's quite hard to find the coin absolutely problem-free. 253 to 268 AD, that's how long the sad Valerian Dynasty lasted for. A family caught in the perfect storm, as everything seemed like it was going to hell in a handbasket. One, by external enemies or by political intrigue, each and every one of its members had a violent end. It's almost like a Game of Thrones adaptation to ancient Rome. Do you have coins from the Valerian Dynasty? I'm pretty sure at least the Gallienus you must have. Let us know in the comment section down below. And consider leaving a like and subscribing if you enjoyed this episode. It really helps the channel. So I hope you enjoyed it, happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.